So yeah,
Wow.
so I'm kind of inundated with a lot of rugby stuff at the moment at work. So
I bet. That's me,
yeah.
the total opposite of me. Inundated with nothing at the moment. Actually, I was inundated with COVID the last week.
Oh,
Oh
oh
God,
man, how you
Jesus.
doing? How are you feeling better now, or is it
I'm well. This is my first day back at work,
right?
and so and um, I it's a the worst. I got over the worst. My wife, she had it really bad. She had really bad aches, and she had nausea. She had everything. She lost her
Mm.
sense of taste, of smell, and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I got off more lightly compared to her. But it was still, it's just still really shit. It just knocks you around. And of course, both the kids had it.
I was going to say, how was Jamie and the kids? Do they get it? Because there's always that worry, right? As a dad, when you've got
Oh,
a child that's more vulnerable to that kind of thing, you're just on eggshells, worrying if they're going to get it
yeah.
worse. Is it going to like you're going to have to go to hospital? Like you just never know how they're going to respond.
It's funny because like Jamie, ironically, probably had it the least symptoms out of everyone, like, which is crazy. Like,
Mm.
for someone who had a heart condition and has asthma and um he was like, out of everyone, he was like the fine, most fine out of everyone. Like, which posed the problem because like here am I kind of not feeling that flash and feeling like I've come down with a flu,
Mm.
and just my energy levels are so low. And I'll be honest, man, when I'm sick, I am just like the grizzliest bear. I'm just the biggest like asshole. And I realized this actually like um about 2 days into it, and I was like trying to care for my wife. Um, my wife kind of gave up on me, I think, and she was just like, so she just, and I was just, and I realized I was like, man, I got to be better than this. Like, this is just bullshit. I got to. I think I was just so frustrated. I just was out, right. We're in the house the whole week now, and I feel like
Yeah.
crap. It was just rubbish.
Mm.
And I, once I actually realized how much of a dick I was, you know, I, I kind of pulled myself out of that and actually started to, uh, be a better, support to my wife and, tell her
Mm.
that actually I actually was being really shit. And, so it's always a good thing to put a hand up in the air and say, hey, listen, I realize actually I was a dick. And,
Yeah, because we've all been there. We've all been there. Like we know,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
takes
we
it
had,
takes a lot to hold your hand up and say, "I'm sorry. I know I was a
yeah,
dick, but
yeah,
I'm out of it now."
exactly.
But
And it's just, yeah, men is particularly bad at doing that. We seem to be,
mm,
um, take me a long time to be able to kind of, um, like, put your hand up or be honest with yourself. And then, when I'm honest with myself is then I actually, um, relay that to the person that, I've either been affecting with
mm,
my bad attitude or bad comments or whatever. Um, you know, and it's funny actually
yeah,
because I said sorry to my son the other day. I said I'm sorry for being a I think I kind of was. I'm sorry for being like getting angry this week and things for so many things. And he's like, "Really? Were you getting angry?" I was like, oh, "You've just been so nice." Like, I really was just like there were moments where I was trying, and then I just, I couldn't keep it anymore, and I just, like snap, and but he was like, oh, okay, thank you, like, so. Um, yeah, but man,
yeah.
it's been. But I'm kind of. My wife is actually astounded that I'm sitting here doing a podcast tonight. She's like, "You sure? Like, you're just it's your first day back." Like, she's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Yeah, I know. I lay
Well,
down at
I'll go
home."
easy on you, Steve.
Yeah,
I'll go
thanks, mate.
easy on
Yeah,
you.
cheers for
Hopefully, we'll gradually ease you back in.
yeah, yeah. Because last week's one I actually was cancelled. Actually, I cancelled it, and then because I was obviously had COVID and I wasn't feeling very good.
Mm,
And then the guy that I was going to interview, his kids were in hospital with some conditions as well.
mm,
So it kind of worked out well for both of us. And we have to reschedule that one, but that's just how it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
We have to roll these punches, man, don't we?
Like I say, yeah,
And
it's life at the moment, isn't it? You kind
it
of,
is.
you're always on. you can never, I don't know about you, but whenever I commit to something, I can never quite commit. I'll say, I'd love to go, but I may have to just play it by ear. Let's see how things are. And I'm always just leaving short notice for things, but that's just the kind of what I'm sure you're the same. Like you're very much dependent on how Jamie is and how the family are, and before you can commit to something. And but you kind of get into that routine where, okay, if we can't go, we won't go. Like they know, and people understand. Most people understand that we're flaky, and when we can't commit to stuff, and we're not very reliable. But I don't care. I care about my family and what's best for Alfie, and that's all that should matter, really. But
no, that's right. It is hard though, isn't it? Because I suppose I've like for us, we've sometimes planning something to go somewhere either has more negative consequences sometimes than positive, because we how do I explain it, like if it's there, we're like, this is what we're going to do, or this is where we're going to go. Is that I think I get like it kind of, I get more kind of anxious about it than if we actually go, let's just do this tomorrow. Let's go tomorrow. And Jamie tends to be pretty fortunate. He does tend to kind of roll with a lot of stuff, which I know is, now we're very, very lucky with that, because I know there are a lot of kids and families that cannot do that. And we've been very lucky in that sense that we can do things very, very last minute. But it can be very hit and miss. Like, and we tend to have more luck with the randomness actually than with the planned. And I think we're not, me and my wife are not really big planners as well. So, flying by the seat of our pants sometimes is, like sometimes the only way for us actually. Yeah. Otherwise, we just never do anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I totally get that.
Yeah. I think that's what it is, because if we schedule something, we're like, that might get cancelled, and then we actually wouldn't end up doing something. So we have to kind of grab the bull by the horn sometimes, just be like, let's do it.
I find it very hard to look forward to stuff now. Like, when you plan something, like if you're going on a holiday or you're planning a day out, I have to hold myself back from looking forward to it, because chances are we may not be able to go. If Alfie's having a bad day, we'll just have to. And that's what I have to be very conscious of how I am around Daisy, because I put myself in her shoes. She's 7 years old, and I remember when I was that age, used to love looking forward to stuff. Like everything, you'd be like, "Oh, we're going to do that next week." Oh, it's great having that thing to look forward to. So I'm conscious that we have to be very mindful of how we are around Daisy. But she's kind of, she's kind of used to it now, which is sad to say. But she knows that, if we can't go to something, and I think the biggest thing for her is like, "Oh, are we all going?" I'd be like, "Well, yeah, we'll go as a family." Oh. Because usually our first response is mummy taking me or is daddy taking me? And that's just heartbreaking, because it's become normal life for her that it'll only be me or Jess, my wife, taking her to something, and one of us will just stay at home with Alfie.
How do you deal with that though? How do you deal with that?
Oh, it's really hard, because for me, I would much rather Jess takes Daisy out to get that break, because look, I work a pretty intensive job, and Jess is at home. She's full-time caring for Alfie. So I see it as whenever I'm not working, and the weekends, it's my turn to look after Alfie. Jess, you go out, have a break, take Daisy to do something. It's heartbreaking that I can't go with her as a family, because you're a family. You want to do everything together. Yeah. And it is horrible when Daisy will be like, "Oh, is it just mummy going or is daddy going?" And it'll be like, "No, we're all going to go. Like if Alfie's having a good day, let's all go." Yeah. And she'd be like, "Oh, great." And then she gets really excited for that. But it makes me feel sad that that's her initial response to anything we say we're going to or we're planning to go to. It's like, is it going to be half the family or all of us? And that's just how she's grown up from a very young age, first with Lola and now Alfie. It's just, she doesn't know any different. And it doesn't make her sad, but it makes her really excited when she knows that we're all going, which is
that's nice,
nice.
isn't it?
But
Kind of gives
it's
it like
hard
a bit of
when
like an adrenaline shot. Like, yeah, we're all going together, man. We're all doing this.
Exactly.
But I kind of understand kind of like this a little bit because Joshua, my youngest, he's about 2 years, year and a half, 2 years younger. And for a long time, I always felt that my attention was obviously our focus was more into Jamie because he needed it. It was just, and he still does need it more. But I always remember feeling that I just wasn't like I needed to have two of me to really be who I wanted to be dad, and I couldn't. It was bloody impossible because I felt bad for Josh because like I knew he wanted to have attention and more attention, but I just couldn't give it to him. And it's just kind of like it's something I always used to struggle with. I don't struggle as much with now. I think I've managed to try and find my emotional way through that. I don't quite know how I managed to do that, but for me that was something because having those two kids, one that does need a lot more physical attention, mental attention, and not being able to kind of offer as much or equal amounts to Joshua.
Yeah,
was always really challenging for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're always weighing it up in your head. You want to make sure you're spending just as much time with every child. But yeah, the reality is most of your time and attention will have to be taken up with Jamie. But I'm sure when you have those moments where we can overcompensate with Josh so that he knows that you are present and I mean, how much does he understand about you needing to spend more time with Jamie? Like, is he still too young to kind of grasp that? Or do you think he's really understanding the reasons why?
I think he does understand. And I think he's put in the last year and a half, he does understand. And he starts to take on like a kind of like a big brother role. Almost sometimes like he'll which is actually I always have mixed emotions with this because obviously he's not the big brother, right? But he kind of steps in and acts like big brother, which is really nice. But it also I know I sometimes feel like like that's I don't know. I can't put it into words. It's like,
is it that you feel he's missing some of his childhood by stepping up and being more of the big brother and being less of the younger brother, playful? And I don't know. I mean, is it that side of it? You think he's growing up too fast, and having to deal with emotions that he wouldn't typically need to deal with?
I don't know.
Or is it just grasping the role reversal? That
I think it's just grasping the role.
He shouldn't be the older brother. Like,
he should,
if all being well and everything was hunky dory, then he would be that young brother. I guess is it still just dealing with the fact that those roles have maybe reversed in some regards? And
and it's just in my head, and it's just me kind of being able to process it, and be like, okay, so he's this is him, and he knows that he's he wants to try and help out, be and I mean I think because he's shown that, I actually put a few more things kind of. I give him a bit more responsibility. Can you get Jamie to do this? Can you ask him if he can do this? Can you help him do that? Like, which is massive for me because it means it's something else I don't have to do. And it just and sometimes, and generally, he's actually pretty forthcoming with that actually. So Yeah, good questions, mate. Who's I've been interviewed. This is
Well,
great.
it's a two-way thing, isn't it? It's like
So-
I see this. It's free therapy,
yeah, it is.
Steve.
It is.
Hopefully, it's the same for you.
No, it is actually. And I haven't done this for now. Well, I say it's been actually over a week and a half now. So I haven't been able to sit down and do anything like this. So it's really good.
Good.
I think that's why I was so desperate to do it tonight. It's like, I've got to do this.
But it's good for the mind to have a break as well. Obviously, you weren't feeling great, but sometimes it's good to just switch off for a bit and then get back into it. And
yeah, for real. So Adam, I got some questions here because I came across you when I was listening to Once Upon a Gene, isn't it? It was the podcast, and I heard, and I can't think how I came to that podcast, and I found you, your episode. I listened to it. There was a couple of other guys on there, but I came across yours, and your one really kind of jumped out at me. And I think it was because I think you were at the back end of your episode that you did is that you talked about guys and how we don't quite know how to talk about these things. And I was like, yes, there he is. There's someone talking about it. There it is, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to, try and see if I can get in contact. And here we are sitting down here doing this. I kind of, I've got, obviously I've got a lot of questions, and your journey is such a, like, it is a very it's a very interesting journey, but it's also an extremely, how I've heard is it's an extremely sad journey from how I've heard, and and so I are you able to kind of tell us a little bit about where you are today and how you got to where you are today? Are you able to do that for us?
I can try. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So yeah, I'm Adam. I've got a fantastic wife, Jess, who we met at university. So we've been together 20 odd years now.
Wow.
Incredibly. She's a nurse, and that's always been a really good grounding for me because I work in a field where it's a constant phrase. It's PR, not ER. So my role is public relations, communications. I deal with very tricky stakeholders and clients, and if I've had a bad day, I go home and talk to Jess, and she'd be like, yeah, but I've had a really tough day on the ward, and we've had these patients come in, and so that was always a very good grounding for me. But anyway, we had a amazing daughter, Daisy, who's just turned 7, and she has been our absolute rock through all of this. Like, we were talking just now about Josh playing that older brother for Jamie, but I mean, the empathy that Josh will have been building as he goes through this experience, like we see that with Daisy all the time. Like, children are very adaptable, but I mean, Daisy arrived perfectly healthy. She's been thriving, absolutely no concerns whatsoever. We then made the decision to have another child, and then it was going to be a home birth. So we had all the preparations in the home to have a home birth. And Lola arrived perfectly straightforward in the middle of the night in the lounge, even though I'd been filling up the hydrotherapy pool in the kitchen for about 2 hours. Lola decided to come early in the lounge. And there were a few little things that kind of stood out for us. She was very quiet. Physically, she had like positional talipes, which is where the feet just point inwards.
Okay.
Which in isolation is it's not a big deal. Often children, once they start to weight bear, they straighten out and you can do physio. But I think it was that linked with some other things that raised a few alarm bells for us. The first thing, after that, it was really around she couldn't go to the toilet properly. So she couldn't pass the meconium when she was born. So we had to give her suppositories for her to properly go to the toilet. So that was a real worry for us, in that why does she not have the strength, or is something going on with her digestive system that she can't do something that should come naturally for any child? And she didn't really scream or she wasn't crying when she came out or anything like that. So it was almost like she was a little bit kind of in a daze. Like, it was almost like a shock to her entering the world. And then just things after that kind of escalated, and it probably resonates with a lot of other people out there. And I think it may have been Casey or one of your previous dads was talking about those milestones. Like, we had the 8-week checkup with our GP, and there were a few things that she wasn't happy with, like the head control and just the making eye contact, all these little things that they have to tick off the list and say, yep, she's doing that perfectly well. And then things kind of calmed down. I mean, it took her a while to put on her birth weight as well, which again is another thing they have to tick off. They obviously lose a lot of water after they're born, but can they bring the weight back up? And then things kind of settled down. Once she hit her birth weight, that was a kind of big relief.
How long did that take?
Come round. I think it took about 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
I could be wrong, but it was definitely longer than it should have been. But once she hit the birth weight, that was a big relief to us. And then you just expect them to thrive after that. But when things really kind of came to fore, it was at 3 months when Lola had her first, what we would call it as a seizure, where it was just that rhythmic jerking. Her eyes would it was almost like she was gasping for breath. It was almost like she was taking a breath inwards, and like she would kind of do a double blink, and it would last like a couple of seconds, but they were starting to happen intermittently through the day. And we were like, is it like she's like hiccuping, or is it like gas? Or so when I remember the first time it happened, I was actually away in Germany for work, and I just remember I got a call from Jess, and it was, just to let you know, we're just in hospital with Lola, and don't worry, they think she may have I can't remember the term for it now, but it's where they like air or gets caught in the throat, but she was connected up all to ECG and have all these wires connected to her. And for me, I was just freaking out. I just thought, I've got to get back as soon as I can.
Yeah, and you're in Germany.
In Germany. And you just
another
feel
another woman country, for God's sake. Like,
exactly.
And just getting these calls, getting a call. And of course,
and I know what Jess is like. She wouldn't want to worry me. And it was, she was with her mum. And so I knew she had that support, but I don't care. I'm his dad. I have to be there and get back as soon as I can. I just remember that feeling of walking in the ward and just seeing your tiny little princess just connected up to all these wires, and she had like a breathing tubes under her nose, and it was like a kick in the guts. Like, do you think
looking back now, do you think that was traumatic for you?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just walking in on your own and going into the ward, and just, it's like your child should not be, she's too small to be connected up to all those wires. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you have no idea what's going on. I had no idea that it was a seizure or what was actually causing her to do these weird things with her eyes. And the doctors didn't really know. They put her on some medication for it's really escaped me the term that they use, but it's basically where there's some kind of issue with like swallowing, or like there's some like air gets trapped in the windpipe, and that was why she was it's almost like a hiccup. But then like the twitches still happen. They were like just little, and they seem to get stronger and stronger happening throughout the day. Doctors didn't really know what it was. We actually booked
how does that feel, Adam? Because that, like, would you kind of expect when you're in a hospital and you're taking your child in there, that you kind of take for granted, don't you, that they're going to have the answers for you?
Oh
You
yeah.
kind of do, don't you? In a way,
Yeah,
like
you
that's
expect them to know.
and
Yeah,
and when you say
absolutely.
like, and they turn around and say, well, actually, we don't. I'm sorry, we don't know what it
Mm,
is. It's like an already kind of stressful situation environment that you're in a hospital for starters, and no
mm,
matter who it is there, but it's your child, right? And
yeah.
then you're like expected to, as a
Yeah, tell us
dad,
what's going
to
on.
be like,
Yeah.
well, here's the dad, the rock, as the one that's supposed to be, nothing affects us.
Mm.
Like, so how did you get through that bit? Because that was really was like the first part of it. How did you? Because you at that time yeah, I don't know. How did you get through that? And then did you look back on it as well, or
I
did you?
think you're very much in a state of, yeah, maybe it's shock. Maybe it's
Mhm.
like you're running on adrenaline. You're kind of, it's that fight or flight. You're just in the moment and you just got to find the answers. And it was reflux. That's what it was. So they put her
Right.
on medication for reflux, which is, yes, a common condition that's very easily treatable. But uh, yeah, you don't really have time to reflect and think. You kind of just when you're in the hospital, you're very
Mm.
much on eggshells. You're just worrying about your child, whether who when are you going to see a consultant and when are they going to come to you
Mm.
with some kind of answers? And because my Jess is a nurse, so I'd automatically look to her and say, well, what do you think? And when she's like, well, we're supposed to be seeing this consultant, and we were on the ward that she was the ward manager. So she works with all these people day in, day out. And now she was thrust into that environment
Mm.
where she was relying on them for answers. And I mean, heaven knows how she would have felt in that
Yeah.
situation. Like, if I was surrounded by people that I trust and work with day in, day out, and now they're looking at me with pity and like with worrying about you and giving
Yeah.
you sympathy, she just wants answers. I just wanted answers. And
Yeah.
I don't know if the hospitals are the same in New Zealand or in Japan where you've been previously, but in England, it's very much a case of you have certain consultants working on shifts and it's luck of the draw who you get. So
Mm.
and you're just sat there waiting. The nurses are incredible. You're treated amazingly well. They look after you, make sure you're comfortable, but they can't give you the answers. It's the consultants that were on shift. And sometimes you're just waiting for hours for them to do the ward round where they go around, see all the
Yeah.
patients who are in the ward. And sometimes it'd be like Jess would say, oh, I've worked with him before. He's not great. Like, I don't think we're going to get much clarity from him today. Or, oh, I've worked with
Wow.
her before. She's like a bull in a china shop. So don't worry if she's very forthright and
You're getting like the
cut straight
behind
to
the
the point.
scenes kind of like
I was getting the behind the
the
scenes,
down
and
low,
she'd be
like the
like,
down low on what they're like. Was it?
exactly, yeah, because Jess had worked with them before.
Yeah.
But for me, I was just kind of, I don't care how they are with me. They can be like a bull in a china shop. They can be very black and white. I just want to know that they are working on it and they're trying to figure out what's going on.
Mm.
And sadly, we would just, that period of our lives was a bit of a blur. I mean, we were
Yeah.
just in and out of hospital all the time.
You
I
are.
remember
Yep.
we'd actually, the first time Lola went into hospital, we got a holiday booked to go to Ibiza, like first family holiday in a nice family resort in Ibiza. We weren't going raving or anything like that, which is what you typically associate with Ibiza. But that was planned. And then automatically we're out of hospital and think we can't go on holiday. Like, there's no way that we don't know what's going on. But we thought, okay, why don't let's book in an appointment with a neurologist. So we found a very credible neurologist near to us and we thought, we'll get that booked in. And then it turned out that the appointment was straight after our holiday. We spoke to the consultants and said, look, we've got this holiday planned. What do you think? And they're like, look, there's no reason why you shouldn't go on that. Like, if anything happens, they have good hospitals out there, heaven forbid.
Seriously, wow.
And we
Okay.
were like, well, we've got this appointment booked in with the neurologist when we get back. So we've got that, like, we need a holiday. We need to go away as a family. First half of the holiday was absolutely fine. And then Lola started doing these, it was this, at this point, it was a combination of these weird sort of twitches, but then her lips would then go blue. Like, it was almost like she was holding her breath or just stopping breathing, which is terrifying. She'd go very floppy.
Oh my God.
So this happened by the pool in Ibiza. And now we're thinking, oh God, where where is the we'd done some Googling to find out where the nearest hospital was, but now it was real. We had to. So yeah, we were there with friends. They looked after Daisy. We just jumped in we got a cab straight to the hospital. And we were there for 3 days. I mean, the hospital was incredible. Like it was almost like we're the only ones there. Like the quality of care we had, but it was the same tests they did in the UK. It was like on the ECG, monitoring her heart. Thankfully, she didn't have any more in the hospital. So it was kind of just praying that she didn't have any more. So they discharged us and we could go home. But they were doing the same tests as in the UK. So checking her eye contact. They noticed she was quite floppy, poor head control. And they said, look, you should really go and see a neurologist. This is not really normal for a child of this age. So that just kind of reinforced the fact that, yeah, things are not, and we felt guilt then, obviously, for going away. But then we're thinking about Daisy's life, and she needed to have a holiday with a family. And so sometimes you have to be very obviously, we're not going to be putting Lola in any danger or anything like that. But it's making sure that we're being as a family as much as we can for Daisy as well as Lola. But yeah, we got back to the UK. We saw the neurologist. And this was a tough one because we were in the car park waiting outside, and Lola went blue, her lips went blue, went floppy in the car park, and it was horrific. I just remember we're in the back of the car, like obviously trying to stimulate her. She came back again. It maybe lasted about 10 seconds, but it felt like a minute, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I bet.
So we'd had that happen, a traumatic experience. We go in to have the appointment with the neurologist, and she was like, well, I can see that she's behind in some regards. I do think it is reflux. And there's some things that her head control is not where it should be, but I've got no reason to be alarmed. And we're like, okay. We were kind of in two minds. We came out of that thinking, should we be relieved or should we be trying to get a second opinion? At this stage, we didn't have anything on camera. So we didn't have anything to, I think maybe we had a couple of jerks that were very subtle on camera that we showed to her. And she's like, yeah, that does look like reflux to me. I can't really make any conclusive judgments from that because they were so intermittent, but very fast. It was very hard to capture them on camera. Yeah. And obviously, when you immediately see something like that, the first thing you want to do is make sure she's okay. You don't want to be
you don't filming it, right?
Yeah, and filming it. You
hang on a second, let's just there's no that does not come into your head, like.
Yeah, so we kind of came out of that thinking, okay, well, she's a top neurologist. Should we be relieved that she doesn't think it's anything like a seizure or anything like that? But still, we'd had that pretty traumatic experience in the car park. We thought, I remember we were driving back and we thought, shall we go to A&E? I think we should. Let's drive her to A&E because we can't ignore the fact that had happened. And then, what do you know? It was sat in A&E. She did it again. She just went completely floppy. I remember the triage nurse came. We grabbed their attention. He came running out, picked her up, and then it was like 5 of them all ran into the ward, getting her fixed up to monitors and everything. And it was like, oh my God! If we hadn't have come to A&E, then what would have happened? If we hadn't trusted our parents' intuition. And I remember once we got things settled, she was like she was kind of back in the room, like on a regular breathing schedule. I remember the consultant came out and said, okay, what just happened? Like, tell me what's going on. And we kind of then gave the backstory of everything. And it felt like no one really believed us. Like when we were going into the hospital before, we were saying that we were seeing these jerks, but because we didn't have any evidence of it, it was almost like, well, yeah, we think it's probably reflux. We don't think it's like, we just felt like they didn't believe us. Like we're just parents. Like
how does that feel though? How does it? Because I think that is not a feeling that is unique, right? I guarantee there's so many parents and guys that they get that, and it's like, how do you get through that? How do you get through that feeling of being like, well, don't worry about it. It's like, well, hang on a second. Like, no, like this is, it's something, right?
Yeah.
And you're
it's hard because you're treated like you don't know anything. You're just a parent. Like they're the experts. But at the same time, you don't want to get angry. You don't want to get frustrated. You don't want to, because you need them. Like you need them to be on side. And you see all these examples of where parents get angry and then it just makes the situation a whole lot worse. You've got to kind of be very balanced. And obviously Jess worked there. She was a nurse. you can't get angry, but you are deep down, you're frustrated. You're like, why are you not listening to me? We're telling you what's going on. Like, we've been seeing these weird twitches and jerks. A normal child shouldn't be doing this. She's not hitting her milestones. She can't hold her head up. They tell you all the things that your child can't do, and you want answers as to why. And then I just remember that the months after that, we were just in and out of hospital constantly. The jerks got more frequent. She was then anytime her temperature used to spike, like she couldn't keep her temperature down, then she would go into she started having like full tonic-clonic seizures, where it's just like a rhythmic jerking, like really heavy breathing. I remember the number of times, because I was working in London at the time, I'd literally get into the office and I get a call from Jess, and she'd be like, I've had to call an ambulance, like she's having another seizure. And I'd literally just unpacked my laptop, and it's like, okay, put my laptop back in, straight back on the train. And it was like an hour on the train back to where we lived. It was that kind of, I was trying to handle work. At the time that Lola was born, I'd just been offered my kind of dream role where I am now. So I was in a position where I was finishing up where I'd worked for 6-7 years in London, had lots of amazing friends there, but I felt like I had to check out from work because I just couldn't deal with the stress of what was going on at home, with also trying to deal with sorting handovers for my clients and like sort of starting to wind down and get ready for my new job. And it was just, in and out of hospital. It was always, we couldn't both stay in the on the ward, which it's a common thing, I'm sure, with lots of the other dads you speak to. So it was always either me staying overnight or it would be Jess. We try and alternate it just to give each of us a break, but also Daisy, like having enough time with both of us. I mean, Daisy loved it. She was treated like a princess on the ward. All the other nurses loved her, and she didn't see it any different. But it's just a horrible position to be in when the family split up. Like, you always know that one half of you's going home, and when you're at home, you're worrying about what it's like on the ward. How's Lola going to be during the night? And then you're dealing with, she's not feeding properly. She wasn't going to the toilet properly still, worrying about the seizures. And at this stage, we didn't have any. The reason why we were going into hospital so much is because we had no idea what it was. We had no rescue medication. So once she had started having a seizure, there was nothing we had at home to act as to stop it. So I think I tallied up the numbers at one point. I think we had to call an ambulance like 15-16 times in the space of maybe 4 months.
Oh my God.
And it was almost like a weekly occurrence. Like, our neighbors would see the ambulance on the drive, and they come round, and
Jesus.
because we had no other comfort. Like, we had to call an ambulance because we had nothing to intervene and stop the seizures. Thankfully, the longest she had was maybe 25 minutes. But still, that's a long time.
Okay. I mean, 25 minutes of, I'm just like trying to put myself into that position for a moment, because 25 minutes of being where here's your child having a seizure, and you basically are at the mercy of what's going on there. And you're like, because we feel like we've got as dads, as we feel like we should do something, and we're like, well, we just don't know what to do. So we get kind of, well, I get kind of frustrated with myself because I don't have the answers, right? How did you do that in that situation of being you're waiting for this ambulance for 25 minutes, and you're like, how did you cope?
I don't think you have time to think. You're in that moment, and your immediate response, fight or flight. You have to be in a position where she's comfortable, and you've done what you can do, which is call the ambulance. You're on the phone to the ambulance, making sure she's got a clear airway. But I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen a seizure before, it is horrific, because your child is doing things that she cannot control. Like, all the muscles in the face are like doing really strange things. Eyes flicking to the back of the head, like coughing and choking because they obviously can't swallow at the time. So you've got to make sure they're on their side in the recovery position. And like, it's the worst sight when you see your tiny little child who's got no control over her body, like arms jerking, legs jerking. And then the relief when it stops is
Yeah.
like, it's just kind of a wave over. You think, oh, thankfully it stopped, because you hear everyone talking about seizures aren't actually, they don't actually cause you any harm. A seizure is actually protecting the brain from a lack of oxygen. Like we've done way too much research on seizures, but
Yeah.
we've always been told, look, don't fear. A seizure is protecting damage to the brain, but still I think once you have a seizure for longer than 30 or 40 minutes, that's when it can cause damage to the brain, because there's only so much it can take. So there's always in your back of your mind, oh, like, how long has it been? You're checking your watch. You're on the phone to the ambulance. They're like, when did it start? How long has it been? First thing the paramedics ask you, okay, when did it start? Because then that impacts like the drugs they can give. And they would give like, I think it was clomazepam or something like that. The first, or diazepam, sorry, was the first drug they gave her, which then essentially intervenes and it stops the seizure from happening. And it would usually be once we're in the back of the ambulance, things would calm down. But it was almost like we're in a rock and a hard place, because we didn't want to go to hospital because they weren't giving us any answers. And the chances are, when we go into hospital, all they do is monitor you. That you're in a cubicle for days. They're monitoring. Sometimes if she had a really high temperature, she'd then have another seizure during the night, and it'd be a case of wait. And we'd always get this respite after she'd been ill or high temperature. She had a couple of bad viruses, which she actually picked up in the hospital. So it was clear that she had a very low immune system. But it's like, until we first got the rescue medication to take home with us, that's when we could try, okay, we need to keep her out of hospital because the dangers of her, and they weren't giving us any answers. In between these hospital visits, it then said it is likely that it is epilepsy. We don't know with epilepsy, obviously it's such an unknown condition. We said, okay, well, where do we go from here? They said, right, we've got medications that we can give for epilepsy. And they're like, well, the good thing is 80% of children respond to the first drug. And then obviously that percentage goes down the more drugs you try. So we were put on the first drug, no response. They were increasing it. They were doing loading doses, no real response. And then you're just you're into a routine of tests, weaning off of a drug, because with these drugs, you can't just stop them. You have to gradually wean them up. You have to wean them down because the body becomes so dependent on them. It's why people who are suffering from drug use, they have to go into remission, and that you can't just immediately take these drugs out of the body, especially when it's a young child. So once you know a drug isn't working, it's the worst thing, knowing that you can't just immediately stop it. Sometimes they take weeks to wean them off fully before you can then try a new one.
Wow.
So in between those periods, you're just kind of going through the motions of like giving them these drugs that, you know, the side effects are horrible. Side effects can be lack of appetite. They can make your head control even worse, drowsy, lethargic, all the things that go against like the child that's trying to grow and develop. It's shutting down a part of the brain that's trying to do something, which is obviously causing these seizures in the first place. So you and then we were having lots of ECGs and EEGs. It's where they monitor the brain activity, which is where you'd have to connect these little electrodes to all the different parts of the head, and then that has to stay on for a period of hours to try and pick up one of these seizures. And I think Lola had 3 or 4 of them, and it was always once they're all connected, she didn't have any seizures until they were taken off. So it's kind of, you're putting her through all that stress of sat like with a bandage around her head to keep them all in place, because it's like they have to put like glue on them. But it was just a never-ending spiral of tests, in and out of hospital, trying new drugs, nothing working, trying to keep things stable at home. And it got to the point where we thought, okay, no more. We are going to keep her at home where we can keep her safe. We've got rescue medication if we need to intervene. We have a loving home. We have family and friends around us. We are not going to go into hospital unless absolutely necessary. And from there, we kind of managed it from home. We tried the ketogenic diet, which was amazing at first. I think it was almost like a switch. It stopped her twitches for about 4 or 5 weeks, but then they gradually started to come back again. It's almost like the brain finds a way around these things, and she was we only got on the ketogenic diet because she got so bad. The only way to get on the keto diet in the UK is through a medical trial. And even then you'll be put on the trial, but you are randomized. So you're either randomized to try the ketogenic diet or you're randomized to try another epilepsy drug.
Okay.
And obviously we were randomized to try a new epilepsy drug. And I just remember me and Jess just sat in the room when they told us, and they're like, we're sorry, it just gets put in the computer and it comes out with the result. And I just remember Jess was just in tears because she's like, we've tried all these drugs. And I remember they would come to us with a list. There was a list of like 20 different epilepsy drugs on that list. And they're like, well, which one would you like to try?
Oh my God. So they're literally giving you the offer. They're actually saying, which one do you want to give a go?
Yeah, it's like you're asking us. Like, we don't know. It's like a finger in the wind. Which one? Because obviously you go through the ones that are more likely to work first, but then it's just like and we were like, well, which has got not the worst side effects? Like, what do you recommend?
And they're like, well,
yeah. And I remember, she was put on this new drug. Obviously, it didn't work. And then I remember we were in accident A&E again, like literally a few days later, and they were on the verge of putting her into intensive care because she was just so bad. Like the seizures are really bad. It was only then when they said, okay, we can try the keto diet now. But it's like, you have to go through these experiences to get what you want. Like that was the frustration.
How did you get through all this, Adam? Because for someone listening and me listening here, how, like, you talk about kind of, you're just doing it. Which I get, and I do understand it because I've had situations with Jamie where I've been kind of in that mode where it's just like but it's like there becomes a point, Adam, where you're like, there has to be for us to kind of be like, I need to like try and be normal, because we can't operate like that continuously, day in, day out, for weeks and months, years on end. We can't. And I suppose, like, how did you manage to get through that? I keep saying kind of like get through stuff because that's the reason why you're sitting in front of me here, is because you got through it. And I suppose
you're a bit like a robot, I guess. You don't.
Yeah.
You just have to put those feelings to the back of your head. Like, I won't try and gloss over it. There were a couple of times where I thought, I can't do this. I remember one particular time when we're all sat at dinner in the kitchen, and it just came out of nowhere. I think Lola started having a bad seizure, and I just started crying, and I said to Jet, I can't do this anymore. And she said, well, if you can't do it, you just need to get away now and just process that and then come back.
Yeah.
And I remember I just took Daisy to see my dad. Like, I just picked up the phone to my dad and I said, please, can I come and see you? Like, please, can me and Daisy just come to you for the day, spend time with you, try and process what's going on, and then go back and be a better husband and dad and support for Jess, because I couldn't be around Jess when I was bringing her down, and because she's going through the same thing. Like, it doesn't need two of us like at rock bottom. It almost needs one of you that's high and one of you to pull the other one through it. And it's been a constant balancing act, I think, through the whole thing. When one of us is having a bad day, the other one needs to pick the other up. And it's that whole goes back to the topic of dads being the fix it guys, the ones that can put their arms around their family and say, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Like, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And I guess for me, I found it really frustrating because I don't know anything about the human body. And like, Jess is a trained nurse. Like, she went through years and years of training to be a nurse, and she understands a lot of what the doctors are saying. She can take what they're saying and process it and come out with her opinion. And for me, I just felt like I was asking stupid questions all the time. I was frustrating her because I didn't know what was going on. And like, I just felt like I was just draining the energy from her sometimes. And it's almost like she doesn't want to hear me talking about my emotions. Like she doesn't want to know when I'm having a bad day, because she's trying to be strong and trying to keep the family together as well.
Yeah.
So I was terrible at the beginning.
Did you talk to your mates? Like, did you have any kind of mate or mates that you were able to actually sit down and actually even have a chance to even, be like, talk about the stuff? And were they even able to, if you did, could they even understand?
I had a couple that really stepped up, in where I least expected it, I guess. I mean, all my really good friends that I went to university with, I mean, we all kind of, what happens is once you finish university, you graduate, you all go back your separate ways, you go where the work is. And so I have really good friends that are sort of all over the country, but I've never really had a best friend. And I've always envied people that say, "Oh, he's my best friend. He's going to be my best man at my wedding. Like, we can just always go for a beer whenever we want. He lives down the road." I've never really had a best friend that I could do that. I've got good friends that I could chat to, and whether it's about common interests like sport but it was never like a regular thing. We'd always just kind of check in and out with each other, but life gets in the way, families get in the way. So I couldn't really just talk about this sort of stuff with friends that we only check in like maybe once every couple of months. And me and Jess have moved to where she grew up, so a lot of my friends in the area I've made through Jess, but we play football together, and maybe we'll go for a drink every now and again, but it's not like someone I go out with every week and we chat through life and work and the universe and go into that level of depth. And obviously some of my friends were aware of what was going on, but it was more, they would kind of message me and say, "Oh, how are things? Like, heard you're in hospital, like anything I can," and they'd always be like, "Anything I can do." But it's like, to be honest, all I want is someone to be here and just have a chat with me. I don't want to be messaging you on like in a hospital ward at midnight, telling you my feelings. But there's a couple of friends that live close by that really stepped up, and I could go for a beer, and they would really try and understand what we were going through and just being there for support. But it was hard going. And I guess with guys, we don't really talk. We talk more about common interest. Like, we talk about the football, or we'll talk about something we're doing at work, or you don't really talk. You talk about your family at high level, but how's the family? Yeah, they're all good. Yeah, we did this, that, and the other.
It's kind of, but how talks around the kind of the outside of stuff. Hey, like, you kind of gloss over things, but you don't really kind of get to the crux of what it is.
Why is that? I don't know. I just don't think we've had experience of doing it. Like, I think and I don't want to stereotype at all. I think for women, it comes a bit more naturally, because they're happy to ask those more probing questions. Like, I think in most cases they're more in touch with their emotions. They're able to convey those emotions. Obviously not in every case, but and I think for guys, it depends how your parents are, I think. And I think with Daisy, we're very conscious in like being aware of her emotions, and like if she's having a down day, like giving her a hug and saying, are you feeling okay? Like, tell me about how things are. I never really had that. I mean, I've got amazing parents, but they went through a divorce when I was 14, 15. So my dad moved out from home, and before he moved out, he was very present at the weekends. But during the week, we never used to really see him. He'd be out in the office before we'd wake up. He'd be home late, and then he'd fall asleep because he was so knackered from being at work all day. But he used to spend lots of time with us at the weekends. But I never used to have those real kind of deep conversations with my dad. And when they divorced and my dad moved out, that hit me really hard, because it was a lot on my mum to look after 3 boys. But I guess it's how your parents are and how you're brought up to kind of be across your emotions and mental well-being. It's great nowadays because it's touched upon at school. We never really had anything about mental well-being at school when we were younger.
And I think that's actually a good point, is because I've got a friend of mine who lives in the UK, and he has said to me about this, how it's very in schools now, they talk about, like, they're asking how the kids feel, to talk about their feelings, which I think is really, really important.
I think it's really important.
Japan is like light years behind in that. I mean, oh my God.
And it's a cultural thing as well, obviously.
Yeah, man. I kind of, I, I've been kind of thinking, I always think about why I don't have the answer to this. And I always like to try and just sometimes throw these ideas around and as to why guys don't talk to other guys about how they feel. And I wonder whether some of the reasons, there's not just one reason. I always think there's a various reasons. Is that when you sit down and you have a beer with your mate says, how are you? Like, is it naturally just, oh yeah, not, oh, just been had a shit day, or, whatever, like not doing too good, like this is going on, like Jamie's doing this, Jamie's doing that, like, and then it doesn't go any further than that. But what I think what we do as guys is we're very worried about going any deeper. We're afraid about going any deeper into talking about how we really are, because we think that the person sitting opposite, either we're so worried that they're going to just get up and walk away because they're like, you're telling me stuff that like is really personal, mate, like, personal to you. And I don't know if I want to listen to that. That's what we're so worried about.
Yeah.
And then we're worried that we're going to lose them as a mate or as a friend, as a buddy, whatever we want to refer them to as. We're so worried about this. And so we're locked in, a lot of guys are locked in that little syndrome of like, I don't know.
Yeah. I'd find that sometimes, when obviously you couldn't have these conversations in a group setting. It'd have to be on a one-to-one basis. Like you're sat with a group of guys having dinner. Oh, how are you? Oh, actually, no, I've had a really, really bad day. This has happened. And it'd be like, you don't want to be a drain on the group.
No.
You save those conversations for, if it's a one-to-one or, but I also wonder whether it's because they just don't know how to respond. Because sometimes I'd find that I'd be talking to friends about they'd ask me how you are. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I've had a shit day. And I start to unload a little bit. And they wouldn't then ask me questions off the back of that. It's almost like they would listen. They'd be like, oh yeah, but I don't know how you do it. And then they kind of move on to something. It's almost like they didn't know how to help me process what I just said.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So then you kind of think, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should just save it for another time. Because they haven't asked me a question off the back of it. And really, they don't know how to, maybe it's just they just don't know how to respond. They've never been in that situation before. And thank God I don't have any other good friends that are going through anywhere near what we've been through or looking after a child with special needs. So they don't know how to process it themselves. And I don't know. But then the more that happens, the less inclined you are to open up next time. And thankfully, I have a couple of really good mates. And this has obviously happened during COVID as well, which made it harder to have those one-to-one go out with a mate for a beer because everyone was stuck at home.
Yeah.
But in some ways, we found COVID actually we found it easier because it meant that we could hide away from the world. And we weren't having people asking how things were and like seeing that Lola wasn't developing properly. And we kind of just hid away at home and we weren't exposing ourselves to the outside world. It kind of made it a bit easier for us.
Simplified it for you.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also meant that we weren't missing out on all those experiences that we would have done being asked to birthday parties for Daisy and being asked to go out for the day, because 9 times out of 10 we'd have to say, I'm really sorry, we can't. Lola's having a bad day. We can't. So then we didn't feel like we're missing out on anything because no one was doing it. No one was going on holiday. No one was having these fun moments. So we kind of felt like, oh, they know what it's like for us a little bit in a horrible way. We didn't have that fear of missing out because we were all in the same boat. And it meant that we could just keep Lola safe at home. We weren't having to go into hospital unless absolutely necessary because we knew the risks that were involved in that. So obviously, during COVID, there weren't those opportunities where I could just go out and see a mate and then have those real deep emotional conversations. So, and I think that just made everyone feel a bit more kind of detached and
absolutely.
And that's why the mental well-being topic came up so much during COVID, because people felt so alone without these touch points to check in on people. I mean, and that's a whole big conversation in itself. But
I mean,
it is a challenge. Yeah, it is. And And then, with Lola, it got to the point where we felt we were going through this constant roller coaster of illness, trying new drugs. When she'd had an illness, she'd then have a period where things were good for a few days, but then they would start again. So it was that it made us feel like we were out of control. Nothing we could do could stop the seizures. It was only illness and something that happened in her body when she was ill, whether it's her immune system kicking in. And then it got to the point where we thought, I know that Jess was really craving having another child because of Daisy not having a younger sibling that would respond and engage with her in the same way that other perfectly healthy younger siblings were doing. So often when a lot of our friends had children same ages, and it's horrible when you're seeing children the same age as Lola growing up perfectly healthy, running around, playing with their older brother or sister, and Daisy's there on her own with Lola in a buggy, asking us, when's Lola going to start walking? When's Lola going to start talking? All that. And then because we knew, I've got 2 younger brothers, Jess has got an older sister, that bond you have with your siblings, obviously Daisy had that with Lola, and that could never change, but it wasn't quite the same. And I knew Jess was really craving having, as a mum, having a child that is perfectly healthy, that you're not worrying about 24/7, just having that, craving that feeling of having a healthy child. And that was a real tough one for us. Obviously I wanted to have, my mindset then was like, we've got to get Lola better. Like, she's going to get better. And I remember I always used to say to Jess, if we can get these seizures under control, Lola's going to thrive. We knew when she was not having many seizures, she was much more alert and she was stronger. But because we've been through just constant heartache and being let down and things not working, it got to the point where, okay, maybe we just need to accept this is Lola. Like, this is how she's going to be. Like, we don't know what her future will hold. So I remember it took me a bit longer to get my head around having another child. And then we made that decision. But we were, first and foremost, we had to make sure, while all this is going on, we still had no idea what it was. So we were working with the geneticists in London. Lola was part of the genome project, where they basically take a blood sample and then they compare it with known conditions on their panel, and they do that once a year. But they'd not found anything that could be the root cause of it. So, and we knew that could take years to find out what the diagnosis was. And they always used to say, sometimes the diagnosis is a comfort, sometimes it's worse, because then you know what you're dealing with. It's really hard to get your head around that. But yeah, all the consultants, geneticists we spoke to, we said, look, what are the risks of us having another child with the same condition? And they said, well, we think it's like a lightning bolt. Chances less than 3%, I think was the figure they gave us. We've tested everything we possibly can for this condition and not found anything. So then we made the decision, we're going to have another child. Had as many tests during pregnancy as absolutely possible to make sure that we were on top of anything that may come up. There was a worry at one point when there was too much fluid around the baby, but it turned out she had diabetes. Like, Jess had gestational diabetes, which is common during pregnancy. That kind of evened itself out before the birth. But yeah, Alfie was born. And there were, again, a couple of little red flags when he was born. He had the same positional talipes with his feet, came out very quiet. And I remember Jess was panicking, saying, why is he not making any noise? Oh God, it's happened again. Like, is it the same thing? I was like, look, don't worry, calm down.
Were you serious? Adam, I want to ask you seriously here. Were you like that situation there and you were like, calm down, it's okay? How were you feeling inside?
Oh, petrified. I was absolutely petrified, because I thought I was also thinking the same, but whilst not trying to show it. Like, I was trying to show to Jess that I wasn't thinking the same, but of course I was. I was. You're like you're looking at every little thing to see, is that the same as Lola? Is that what she did when she came out? And it's awful, because he's a totally new child. He's a little boy, and he's like, you don't want him to come into the world with the parents like questioning everything he's doing.
Mm.
And I remember they had to whisk him away just to check that his windpipe was connected properly, because they said they couldn't find any fluid in his stomach when they had the scans. So there was a worry that had become detached, but they ran a tube through. That was all fine, came back in. And then his heart rate was quite high. But then overnight he was screaming. He was going to the toilet properly. He really perked up. His breathing calmed down. So it was almost like, okay, panic averted. Jess spent a night in hospital with him. We were given the green light to go home the next day. And from there, we were just like, okay, he's going to be okay. He's going to be fine. But then you're just immediately, it's like, okay, we just got to make sure he's hitting these milestones. And you're keeping an eye on it. Okay, what's he supposed to be doing by 4 weeks? What's he have to do by 5 weeks? He took a little while he put some birth weight on, but then it dropped, and then it took a while for it to go back up. So it's like, okay, that's not ideal. But and then we had the 8-week checkup with the GP. She was really happy. Nothing came through that. So we thought, okay, that's great. Like, he's doing what he should be doing at the 8-week checkup. But then kind of things plateaued a little bit. We had the health visitor came round, and she didn't really say much, which was always worrying for us. She'd be there like observing and watching what we were doing with him. Okay, his head control wasn't quite there yet, and we were a bit worried about that. But she didn't really say anything. She left. And then it was like 5 days. She called Jess and she said, oh, it's the health visitor. There's a few concerns I had with Alfie when I came to see him last week. And I've had a few days to think about it. And I'm really worried about his head control, and he should be doing this. And I remember Jess was just like, you've waited a week to tell us that. And then we were straight on the phone to our neurologist. And we were like, is this normal? Like, should we be worried? And then it was almost like overnight, he had his first seizure, like exactly the same as Lola's, 3 months to the day. They thought it was a febrile seizure because his temperature, it was just way too high. But yeah, we were thrust straight back into that again, had to call the ambulance. And I remember Jess was just carrying him, and she's like, I can't, like, he's not right. He's having a seizure. And I just remember like running upstairs, because I was going to go in the ambulance with him to the hospital. I said, don't worry, I'll go with him. And I remember just staring into the mirror, and I just said, this can't happen again. It can't be the same thing. This can't be. And I was just looking at myself saying, we can't go through this again. How this is like,
it's like, what you kind of wanting the mirror to kind of be like, give you an answer or say, aren't you? Like, because I can imagine.
You kind of thrust. It's like just deja vu all over again. And we were, straight back into hospital, seeing the same consultant that we'd lost kind of trust with through Lola. And she was like, well, what are you doing here again? And it's like, and I said to her, I really hoped I'd never have to see you again. Not personally, but I can't believe and as we went into the hospital, they tried to take us into the ward that we'd been in with Lola so many times. And I just said, look, I'm really sorry. I can't go in that ward again. We're not going to be going down the same journey. We have to go into another ward. And it was just, and that's kind of gone from there. And I missed out probably the biggest trauma, obviously.
Well, actually, and I wasn't sure what was going on here with this, whether that you wanted to avoid that or not. But
yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing as well. I mean, Alfie was four days old when Lola was, we'd actually started her on a course of steroids about 4 weeks before. I think it was, 4 weeks before Alfie was born. Things got really bad again. I went into, we called the neurologist, and he said, look, given that things are so bad again, we think it's worth you coming in as an inpatient with Lola, and we'll run some more tests. We'll do an MRI and another ECG because her seizures had really escalated, and they felt that there was more chance of it being picked up in the tests. So I went with Lola. It was still during COVID, so only I was allowed to go. We went on the ward as an inpatient, so sort of North London, about 2 hours away from home. and then ran the tests, and then I think it was within like a couple of hours of one of the tests they ran. I remember that our neurologist, David, he came onto the ward. He was sort of huffing and puffing as if he like ran from the other end of the hospital, and he's like, right, we've got the results back from the test we just ran with Lola, and the types of seizures. She was basically just in a constant seizure. Her brain was just, the activity was so frequent. And he said, we've seen positive response to steroids in the past with children. So I really think we should try that. He said, what do you think? And I said, look, we've got to try it. Let's just do it. Like, how quickly can we do that? He said, well, we can start it today. And we started Lola on steroids. I remember the young nurse that came up to me, she came up with the first tablets that we had to crush down and then put in a syringe for Lola. And I remember holding it up, and I said to her, do you believe in miracles? I remember saying it to her, do you believe in God, or do you believe in miracles? And I said, we really need this to work. And she was a bit uncomfortable, but she said, yeah, actually, no, I'm quite religious, and and she said, I'm all behind you with this. And I said, we've been down this route so many times. We've started a new medication, and I remember me and my wife, we would like kiss the bottle and say, like, right, we've got to bless this bottle. It's got to work. And I remember doing it because I was on my own with Lola in the ward. I've been there for 4 days, and
so
I kind of reached
your house is like 2 hours away, right?
It was about 2 hours away. So yeah, Jess was at home with Daisy.
She was with the newborn with Alfie.
I know at this stage Alfie hadn't been born yet. So
sorry, okay.
Yeah, so she was pregnant. So this was about 5 weeks before Alfie was born.
Okay.
So I can't have Jess in exposing herself in the hospital, like at the risk when you're pregnant with COVID around, because we had to go in an isolation ward. We had to have tests. We were put in like this wing of the hospital on our own until our results came through. And then, so I said, I'm going to be on the ward with Lola. I don't care what you say. So Jess was at home with Daisy. But yeah, because I was on my own, I was kind of like, I reached out to this nurse and just said, look, I need you to help me bless this medication. It's got to work for Lola. And from the moment she had that first dose of steroids, it was like a switch. Like, I mean, Jess said when she picked us up from the hospital that we were discharged the next day.
Wow.
And she said it was like she picked up a different child. And she was, from then on, we didn't see her have another twitch, seizure. Obviously day by day you're worrying about when they're going to start again, because we've been in that boat so many times. And then you'd see that first one and then they'd escalate again. So you're trying to enjoy it, but then you're in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, I can't stimulate her too much because that might cause her to have a seizure. And but it lasted about 4 weeks, and then it got to the point where steroids are only a short-term solution. You can't, it's not long-term because of the other side effects. And I remember she was quite grouchy. Obviously, we know that steroids can have that impact on your mood. So she was quite angry some days, quite grouchy, and her eating wasn't great. But you deal with it. If it meant that she's having no seizures, you can deal with that side of things. But it got to the point where we're now having a conversation about, okay, thinking about Alfie being born, stability, but we'd also have to think about weaning off the steroids and seeing how things go. I remember the doctor saying, what we'll do is we'll kind of gradually wean her off and see what the threshold is. Like, how much does the body need to stop the seizures from happening? So we'd actually stopped them the week before Alfie was born, and we were just kind of playing a waiting game, like just seeing how she responded, how long she would go before they'd start again. And then obviously Alfie was born. Lola was good as gold. We were really worried about leaving her with Jess's parents because we couldn't really leave her overnight. But yeah, I mean, I've got a video I took of her like the day before. We were giving her a breakfast in the garden. She was really kicking her legs and like absolutely no reason for concern. There'd been so many times when we put Lola to bed worrying about how she would be during the night. And she when we put her to bed, absolutely fine. But yeah, 4 days after Alfie was born, went down into her room, and she'd obviously passed away peacefully during the night. But I struggled with this a long time, because that night in the morning, I went into Daisy's room first. I don't know why. because we always used to go in and see Lola first. It was like a routine. Like, we've got to go in, make sure she's okay. And she was always like, she'd always be looking at you through a blanket or something. But for some reason, I went into Daisy's room first, and we had a really lovely cuddle in her bed, and we were chatting about what we were going to do that day. And then I went into Lola's room, and that's when I found her. And then Daisy was running in as well, because often Daisy would go into Lola's room first thing in the morning, and she stopped like playing with her and laughing with her. But for some reason, I don't know why, maybe subconsciously something in my head said, you've got to go and see Daisy first. And I'm so thankful I did, because if Daisy had found her, I don't know if I'd have forgiven myself, like the trauma that would have caused her. And it took me a long time. I also felt guilty because I hadn't gone in to see Lola first for a long time. But when me and Jess had some couples counseling, like when we were kind of dealing with losing her, the lady said, actually, that's the best thing you could have done, because you had that moment with Daisy, just you two, before everything happened. And when I say everything, finding out you've lost a child in your home, you're just caught up in a whole, like, the world kind of collapses on you, and you're surrounded by, yeah, I mean, we had to have a helicopter come in, and we had about 15 paramedics in the house. So you're kind of trying to protect Daisy from that. We had her in the lounge. Thankfully, Jess's mum and dad, they live just down the road. So they were in the lounge with her. We're in the bedroom with Lola and the paramedics, and like just everything kind of, it's like an explosion of emotion and stress. And then obviously I knew that she'd gone. Like I knew that as soon as I'd found her and seen her, but they just have to go through the tick boxes. They have to do certain things before they can then pronounce that child is dead. And we had no control over that as parents. They had to do it, even to the point where we were outside the front of the house talking to one of the doctors, and we said, look, she's gone. Like, why can't they just leave her alone now? And they said, no, they have to go through this. And he said, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to go to the hospital now. And we still can't pronounce her dead yet. They're still, they're bagging her. They're trying to go through. He said, we can't actually do any of that until we're in the hospital, where we have other consultants there to give it the green light to approve it. And so we had to go in the ambulance with her to the hospital. And I just remember they warned us. They said, right, when we go into that ward, this is like probably one of the worst experiences you're going to go through, because she said there's going to be a lot of people in there, a lot of people. And that kind of, I didn't expect it to be that many, but I remember we were walking down the corridor behind the bed with Lola on there, and there must have been about 30 people lined along the corridors and then into the ward that we had to go in. Consultants, nurses, police were there. And yeah, so that was just, I mean, the trauma of that was awful. Then you've got police going to your house. So we had to have the police go to a house where Daisy was still there with her grandparents and our neighbor. The police are going through, examining her cot, like talking to our family, making sure that there's no foul play. Then we had to be interviewed by the detective in the hospital, maybe like 30 minutes after they pronounced Lola had passed away. Like, this is all the stuff that you just never, I mean, heaven, if you never think about losing a child anyway, but this is all the stuff that comes with it. Like, it's just, so you don't even have a chance to process what's going on. And it's, yeah, so that was, and then you're also thinking about, you've got a 4-year-old boy at home, who needs to be with his mum. So that was a huge trauma. And I guess maybe we haven't properly processed that yet. And I guess because Alfie started with his seizures at 3 months, almost, we kind of started that same journey with Lola. We almost feel like there's a lot of Lola in Alfie in terms of his mannerisms. And obviously the seizures are almost exactly the same. Thankfully, he doesn't have as many of the big ones, but it's almost like we still feel that we've got Lola with us. Like, he looks very similar to her in some regards. And so we've never really had to process the loss of a child, because we lost one and then we had a new one come into the world almost a few days apart. So it's
I'd say, man, I've listened to a couple of stories, and it is heartbreaking to listen to, and because it's just so sad, and I can't. There's no other word that even I can't think of any other word that covers it, because it's I think I just cannot even find the right words to even say, and all I can say is I'm so sorry, because it is got to be so hard on every single person around you, and of course including you, because of being the dad. And it's like, how on earth are you expected to even like process this, work through that kind of the trauma and the grief and all this, and then you have another child which is 4 days old, just coming to the world.
I think for us, we just put everything into Daisy and Alfie, and we said from the very beginning, okay, we've started on this journey again, but it's not going to be the same journey. We're kind of coming into this with all the experience of what we went through with Lola. She's still very much a part of our lives and ever present because of Daisy. Like, Daisy talks about her all the time, which is, I love it. Like, she's always drawing her. She's always writing her little notes around the house. We have a jar that she can write letters to Lola and put it in the jar. So we're helping her process things. And but you just put everything into Alfie, and I guess we always said it that Lola waited for Alfie to arrive. Like, Lola's seizures stopped just before Alfie arrived because she wanted our home to be relaxed, not on eggshells, not worrying about dealing with seizures. She gave us that period of 5 weeks before Alfie arrived. She wanted us to be in a state of comfort, excitement for Alfie arriving. And it's almost like she waited for him to arrive before she said, right, I'm ready now. I've had enough. And there were times where we thought, how she put up with this day in, day out? Because she had a tough life. She waited to make sure that Alfie was okay before leaving. But now in retrospect, we're kind of like, did she know that Alfie had the same thing? And she knew that we could never, how could we deal with 2 children with this condition? Okay, you just do. Like, so many people ask me, how do you do it? Well, you just do. You're a parent. Every parent would do what we're doing. Yeah. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice, do you?
Well, there are people that just walk. There are guys that just walk away. There are guys,
and I cannot fathom that.
But you've stepped up big time, and you've been like, this is, because of who you are, Adam, and like that's huge. That's huge.
But I'm very lucky. We are very lucky because we have had our own children. And I know I've got a couple of very good friends that have been trying for children for a number of years, and they've not been, I'm convinced they will soon, that if they, and there's amazing ways like IVF, but they've been going through IVF for a while now. They haven't had the feeling of having their own child. We have. Thankfully, we've had Daisy, Lola, and Alfie. Daisy is incredible, and she keeps us going, and she keeps us grounded, and she keeps us with that childlike perspective. Lola, we had nearly 3 amazing years with her in our lives. It was tough. We learned a whole lot. We had her physically in our lives for that period, but we have her for the rest of our lives because she's our daughter. She'll always be our daughter. And Daisy is constantly talking about, we love talking about her. Now we have Alfie, who, okay, he's got a lot of troubles, and we're on a similar journey to Lola, but we're convinced to do it differently. And there's ways in which we're doing that. We have had the feeling of being parents, and we cannot forget that we are very lucky and we're very blessed for that. And it's all about, the way I deal with it is, you have to take it day by day. And I'm sure you do this as well. We talked earlier about, we can't plan ahead. We take things day by day. We don't know, like one day Alfie will have a bad day. We don't know why. He'll just have a bad day. It's how we deal with that. Other days he'll have a better day. And I'm thankful that he has developed I'd say he's developed more than Lola ever had at a much younger age. So thankfully we've got that to work with. Like, he laughs every day. He looks at me every day. He takes comfort in like making sure I'm there. He'll grab my ears and he responds to us, and he feels stronger. He's starting to play with his toys. And so we're getting there. It's going to be a long road, and we don't know where his potential lies, but we know that he's not suffering in the same way that it felt like Lola was. It was very rare that she was able to laugh and react to things. She was very and we think a lot of that was due to the medication causing that on her body. So we are convinced now that we don't feel like medication is the answer for this, whatever this condition is. We found other ways to manage it. And also, working with him in what makes him happy, what he doesn't like. He's developing a real character, and it's about taking it day by day and finding that one thing every day that brings you joy, whatever that may be. Whether, for me, I always make sure I'm home to give him his bath, and thankfully I'm very lucky with my job. I can work from home whenever I can, and but I just love doing his bath time. It's the same with Lola as well. That's our time where he plays in the bath, and like, that brings me pure joy. It can be a case of just cuddling in Daisy's bed when she's reading her books from school that day. Like, every day, no matter how bad he is, he's had some horrific days where his temperature's been awful, he's been lethargic, but there's been that one moment where he'll give me a smile, or he'll laugh at Jess, or he'll show that he's there, and he wants to reach out to us, and he wants to reach out with the world. And that's all you can do. Focus on what brings you joy every day. And so you've got to at the end of the day, if you've had a bad day, it's okay. Tomorrow we'll find that one thing that makes it all worthwhile. And of course, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but it's the life that he's been given, and we just have to make the best of it, keep him safe, make sure we're fighting for him in every way we can. And we haven't really talked about the fact that they didn't even believe us about this condition as well. Like, that was a whole fight as well. We connected with this family in Canada. I was doing what most parents do when they don't know what's going on with their child. I was trawling Facebook. I was joining all the epilepsy groups I could. And I got so desperate. I posted a short video of one of Lola's seizures, and this mum in Canada reached out to me, Katie. And she said, I'm very rarely on Facebook, but I saw your message come up, and I felt so inclined to respond to you. This looks almost identical to the seizures that my son Levi has. And then we started talking. She mentioned this condition called CRELD1 that they'd recently her son had been diagnosed with, and sadly they'd lost a daughter to the same condition. It's almost like we were living the same lives. They had a perfectly healthy daughter the same age as Daisy. They had a daughter that passed away, and then they had Levi that also had this same condition. And I remember just reaching out to our geneticist and saying, look, we found this condition called CRELD1. Please, can you test for it? You've got Lola's blood samples. Please test for it. And they were just kind of disregarding it. They were like, well, there's no link between CRELD1 and epilepsy. So we can't, there's no reason for us to test that. If you Google it, there's nothing available online. CRELD1's typically associated with heart conditions. But I remember 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 times just reaching out and saying, please, look, we think these seizures are identical to this family in Canada. Like, can you test for it? And I think they just stopped responding. But then it was like, as soon as Alfie started having the same seizures, we asked again. I remember calling up the geneticist and saying, look, you have to test for Alfie and Lola for this condition. 24 hours later, they ran tests and found it straight away. They said, yeah, we found anomalies in the CREL1 gene. We're very sorry. And it's like shallow words at that point. I remember me and Jess on the phone to them saying, why didn't you listen to us?
Yeah.
It certainly wouldn't have changed and we thought long and hard about this. It certainly wouldn't have changed our decision to have another child, because Alfie is our little boy and I wouldn't change that for the world. But at least we would have been armed with all the info, and we would have gone into that decision knowing what the risks were. But we were going into that situation blind, thinking, okay, well, the risks are so low. And even now they're saying that the chances of it happening again, if we were to have another child, they still say that the risks are 25%, because me and my wife are both carriers. So you have to both pass on the bad gene for them to become a dominant gene. And it just so happens we've had 3 children and 2 children have had it. Thank the Lord that Daisy didn't. She's perfectly fine. But Daisy could still be a carrier. So when she's old enough to have children, she still needs to know about this. So part of me is like, well, if we hadn't had another child, we would have probably just not forgotten all about it, but would we have been going into still researching what it was? Or we would have just thought, okay, Lola had epilepsy. We don't know what the condition was. We try and move on with our lives in the best way as possible. But now it's kind of given us that reason to fight to understand what it is. So trying to build a community around this condition, trying to connect the other families. There's only maybe 20 children in the world that they know about who've got this condition.
Wow.
But there could be a whole lot more. But that just shows how rare it is. So we're now part of a research study with some of the other families with Yale University. So they'll be publishing a paper, hopefully the end of this year. We've now built a scientific advisory board with specialists across Canada, the US, in the UK, just getting them talking, like trying to share their knowledge and understanding of what this condition is. Through our diagnosis, there's another family in the UK that have now had a diagnosis for their daughter. So they've got some kind of, not closure, but clarity and understanding and feeling like they're not on their own. We consider, we're now kind of this family of,
that's massive, isn't it, on its own? It's just feeling that there's someone else out there who is in a situation like yourself, right? When you first found those, the family in Canada.
Yeah. Because we were on our own when we first heard about, other than this lovely family in Canada, Katie, that we were talking to. We then got added to this Facebook group where there are these other families. So now we can have these conversations, and I built the website just to have something online. Like, I don't know where it's going to go, what it's going to do, but just so people can Google CREL1 and epilepsy. There's a website. There's other people's stories on there.
Yeah.
There's knowing that it's got a name and people are aware of it and something is happening. But we got to be realistic, right? That's not going to help. It's not going to help Alfie in his lifetime, which is very sad, but it may help other families. And even if it just helps one family feel like they're not on their own, that's surely a good thing.
That's huge. I think that's huge. That is just massive. Man, Adam. Wow.
I probably haven't eased you back into work, have I, Steve?
No, you haven't actually, but that's okay. This is maybe those tears I got out before we were good for me, mate. And I got a couple of questions. How has this whole situation that's gone on, how has it changed you as a man, as a dad? Like, how has it changed you, do you think?
I think I've changed in the way that, and I've said this to a couple of friends, like, that I haven't seen in a long time. I'm probably a bit, not harder, but it's really hard to put into words. Like, I feel like during this time, I have to be so much more aware of how I am around other people, like my family, like kind of compartmentalizing what I'm going through, but making sure that I'm present for Daisy, Alfie, Jess, and making the most of the moment, and like trying not to get away in the stars thinking about things, like doing that in my own time, being much more mindful of like looking after myself, so that I can be.
How do you look after yourself?
Well, the main thing I do is I play football once a week, and that's the one I'm playing tonight, actually. And it's the one thing I look forward to, because it means that for an hour on a Tuesday evening, I can kick a ball in anger and I don't have to think about anything else. I don't have to think about the shit that I've had to go through that particular week. I don't have all the emotions running through my head. I'm just trying to kick a ball. That's why I can't go to the gym. I can't go for a run. I can't go. I've tried going swimming. But those are all activities.
You actually tried all these other things along the way. And
I've tried all these other things, like, going for a swim in my lunch break, or I used to do a lot of long distance running, but I find those are sports where you've got a lot of time to think. Like when you're running, you've got things going through your head. Swimming, I tried that, but I was just still thinking about stuff that was going on. I kind of need like some kind of competitive sport where I don't have the chance to think. Like I'm just there in the moment, with mates, and no one's asking me about what's going on. I don't have to deal with any. I can just take out anger, like, because, and I know you've talked about anger, and how you deal with that on a few of your previous episodes. And I've never been an angry person, and I kind of used to bottle things up, and I used to overanalyze things a lot, but I never used to consider myself angry. And it's weird. I've never said this to anyone, but like it was a few weeks ago where I think I was just at home on my own with Alfie, and like he was going through a spell where he wasn't eating anything. He would just reject his milk. Like, and I remember like I was trying to give him his bottle and he just kept shaking his head and doing this funny little thing he does where he just completely rejects it. And I don't know what it was. I just got really angry. And I just remember I put Alfie on the settee that we were sitting on in his blanket, and I just got his bottle and I just chucked it across the room, and it hit the window. Milk went everywhere, and I just remember just shouting at the top of my lungs, and it's almost like I just needed to get that release. It's probably because I hadn't played football that week or something stupid. But I don't know what it was. I just needed to get off my chest. I was like, why? And I just remember saying to myself, why are we having to go through this again? Like, what have we done in a previous life that we have to go through this once, and now we're going through it again? And it was something as petty as like he just didn't want his milk. Thankfully I hadn't caused any damage. I hadn't smashed a window or anything. It was just like a plastic milk bottle. But and then I cried. I picked up Alfie and I cried and I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I'll never do that again. Like he obviously saw it. He was just sat there on the settee, and he's only 20 months old. But I just cried, and I just said, I'm never going to do that again. I love you, and we're going to get through this together. And I think I just said something like that. And then I was fine. It was just that I've just never been an angry person, but that just kind of, it was just a constant build up of everything. And that's why I think
that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. It's that build up, like little things on top of other little things.
Yeah.
And then we're only bloody human.
Yeah.
And I
didn't feel out of control. It wasn't that kind of anger where I thought I had no control over my body, but it's almost like I just needed to do that physical kind of chuck something.
Yeah.
In anger, I felt in control of myself, but afterwards it's almost like a weight had been lifted where I thought, okay, I just needed to process that. I didn't want Jess to see it. I didn't want Daisy to see it. Okay, Alfie saw it, but I apologized to him afterwards, and I felt so bad. I just felt guilty, like having to something. It just kind of it built up, and I think dealing with that, you have to find those ways to release that. Now I'll never do that again. I'll find other ways to, whether that's just playing football where I can just kick a ball. It doesn't matter how hard I kick a ball; it's not going to hurt anyone. But it's that release of kind of frustration and tension, and I think at that time,
it's so important, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just, and there are things that there are so many guys, I keep saying this almost every episode, is there are so many guys who don't have they don't know what to do. They're in that little world of they're just being the carer role, and they're and also working and coming home and then being a carer, and there's nothing in between that. And I was like that I felt like I was like for 11 years.
Yeah.
And I
And
know
you
what
you obviously had that scary moment where you had to go to hospital, and then you're like, wait a minute, if I don't look after myself, how can I look after Jamie and my children, like, and my wife? Like, there's no point me grinding myself into the ground, because that's not going to help them.
No, that's the thing. But the sad thing about it all is that it takes those moments, like, not with everyone, but those kind of moments of, serious moments where, you have to really kind of look at what you're doing from your health and what you're doing with work and all that kind of stuff, is it takes those moments to see it. Sometimes you can't see it because we're so like absorbed into worrying about someone else and trying to do everything that we're not able to, even for more than 10 seconds, to like look at ourselves and be like, what the hell's going on? Like, what is going on? And I think it's, why am I feeling so pissy? Why am I so angry? Why am I snapping? And and it's just so much there. And I think that, as for me, as myself, is I can always just try and I can always be better to myself. I can always be better to myself and listen to how my body is, what's going on. Listen to my heart a hell of a lot more than my head. Because my head sometimes says, okay, go, work 12 hours a day. But in my heart, my body's like, that's not going to happen. So there's that negotiation that goes on, and I start, that's so important for me. But it, but
I also feel like, it's kind of, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
No, I was going to say, for me, it's almost giving Jess those opportunities to look after herself as well.
Yeah.
And being mindful and saying, okay, you've had a tough day, go for a swim. Like, why don't you just go out for the evening and do what you need to do to look after yourself and just get away from things? Because I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same, but with work, I feel work is like a bit of an escape for me, because I know that I can just try not to think about what's going on at home and just focus on work, get my work done. That's a bit of an escape for me. And I'm just so mindful that Jess doesn't have that, because she is 24/7 Alfie's carer. We are both his carers, but I get the break when I'm working because I have to pay the bills and make sure we're funding the things that we want to try for him, which is not cheap. It's expensive, and I need to make sure that I'm working to give those opportunities. But I'm just so mindful of like making sure that I'm not bringing Jess down. Like, if I'm having a bad day, just try and rise above it, because she doesn't want to hear that. She doesn't want me to be draining her energy. Like 9 times out of 10, if Alfie's having a good day, we're having a good day, and we're feeling in a much better state of mind. When he's not good, we're both on edge, we're both stressed. But it's like, how do we deal with that so that we're not giving off that energy to Daisy, so that she doesn't feel like mum and dad are sad? Like, so it's making sure you look after yourself, but also I need Jess to help look after herself as well.
So important.
And you're probably the same with your wife. Like, you want to make sure that she's getting those moments to get away. And
I tell you what,
get what she,
Junko is I tell you, I'll be honest, she doesn't listen to me. I'll be honest. She'll listen to this podcast. Junko, please listen to me. We're not like, I often say to her, rest, lie down, take a rest. I give it half an hour, go and lie down, go and rest. And, often she won't, but there are times that she does. And it's like, oh, goodness, thank goodness she's actually like done this, because she is like, just, she has like 8 billion balls that she balances.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. Yeah, mums are incredible. Yeah,
you know what? Like,
I don't know how they do it.
I feel very inferior, and with what I do, but then I have to remind myself that I am like, my ability to what I can do is, I'm like, as in my power, what I can physically do, and set my mind to do. That's it. I can't put like 8 trillion things onto my plate because I can't do them, and I just can't. And effectively, and I just end up, running myself into the ground, which is what I did for 11 years. And I just can't do it anymore. Okay, I got some final questions here. I actually have loads of questions, but we could be here all bloody day doing this. Okay. What's something that really, laughing is so important. I've really started to make a conscious effort to laugh at things, and just let myself go, because I don't think I laughed enough, actually. Probably like, a full laugh, just like getting it out there and about something. When was the last time you had a really good laugh, almost tears in your eyes kind of situation?
It's funny you should say that. Last night
good.
Daisy's usually the source of all our laughter, because she's such a character. But it's just like it's being a kid. Like, my dad is brilliant in that regard, and that he's always been a bit of a prankster. So whenever we were young, he would always be the one that was hiding in cupboards, scaring my mates. Like, he was just a joker. He had
your dad in the cupboard?
My dad, yeah. Honestly, there was one point we were in the garage. Like, we converted the garage into a games room, and we had like one of those roof windows, like a Velux window, and we're all in there in the dark playing on a game. And my dad had climbed up on the roof and put his head through the window just to scare us. That's the kind of stuff he would do. I think even to the point where, when my mum and dad first got married, like, he hid in the cupboard, like, on their wedding night, just to make her jump. Like, these are all the stories of him when he was young. He was just a bit of a prankster. He was known at the office. Anyway, I love doing that sort of stuff with Daisy. And last night, it's our routine every day. We'll give Alfie his bath. Daisy will come and have her bath. And then we'll all just kind of congregate in Daisy's bedroom on her bed. We'll get Alfie ready in his pajamas. We'll read her stories from the day. And for some reason yesterday, Daisy's got these like sliding mirrored doors for her wardrobe at the end of her bed. I got Alfie ready in his pajamas, and I just hid in the wardrobe for when she gets her because she always gets her uniform out and puts it on the door handle. And I was hiding in this wardrobe for about half an hour last night. They were just they were laying on Daisy's bed with Alfie, just reading her stories. I was like, when is she going to get her uniform out for tomorrow? And in the end, it got to like half an hour in. I was standing rigid in this wardrobe. I had all these coat hangers in the back of my head, trying not to move because I didn't want them to give the game away. And then it was really funny. They started talking about, Daisy just had her birthday. She's got these massive unicorn balloons in her bedroom. They're about this big. So every time I'm going in her room, there's a balloon in my face. And they said, they were chatting on the sofa. They're like, what can we do to make Daddy jump? Why don't we put the unicorn balloon in this wardrobe, so that when he gets his work jacket out in the morning, it's going to really make him jump? So I was like, you little rat. So you're chatting there about making me jump. And at that point, I just opened up the door and said, what are you talking about me?
Oh my!
And I swear they both just jumped out of their skin. And Alfie burst into tears because he's like, what the hell was that? And then Daisy and me were just rolling around on the bed, just laughing, like, because she's got this real giggle that's infectious. And I just little moments like that. It's just playing a kid.
That's just great. You
can't take life too seriously. Like, I have to deal with some real serious stuff at work, day in, day out. And it's just like, if you can't have a laugh with your kids at the end of the day and just have a bit of a play before bedtime, then what's life all about? Like, and they say, don't they, when you laugh, you release all these endorphins, and it's good for your body to release those chemicals. Like I say, every day, if you can't have, and Jess was playing around with Daisy, like she was doing, like she was talking to her like a teacher, like putting on a funny voice, and because that's what Daisy wants. She wants to play with her mum and dad, and she's been through so much serious stuff for a 7-year-old. We've got to play with her like she's a child. Like, we've got to make the most of that, because before you know it, she's going to be wanting to go out with her mates, and she won't want me to be playing around with her. She'll want me to be giving her money to go to the shops or something like that.
Shops,
yeah.
Come on, Dad, where's that wallet? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Well, can I share a moment actually that yours is actually much more intricate than mine.
When I was listening to when you had Jamie on and you were laughing about him singing, like that short episode, I was listening to that this morning and just listening to you laughing in the background as he was like singing along, and I thought it was brilliant. Like, anyway,
no, was we were, because this week, actually last week, sorry, we had COVID came and had a big party in our house, and all of us got it, and so we were. I think it was on Thursday or something this last week, and we kind of, as I'm sure lots of people know, when you have COVID in the house, is like just all the rules go out the window with just trying to like get through without having to like lose your mind and lose your health in the process. But anyway, we had a tatami, which is I'm sure most people are familiar with Japanese tatami. It's like the traditional flooring. We have a room there, and we've got a TV on a swing bracket that swings around from into that room or into the dining room there. And it's a big kind of bit of an open space. Anyway, so Junko is lying down there. We've got a mattress, and she's lying down there. It's been up there for probably about the last 5 days. And she was lying there, and the TV was facing her. And she had lost her, at this point, she had lost her kind of sense of smell. And her taste as well, and she was, just kind of barely getting through. Really, wasn't feeling great. And Jamie was sitting opposite me on the table, facing me. So I'm facing Junko, but I can't see her because she's down on the ground. And I have the remote, and I'm thinking that this TV is a bit loud because it was just pissing me off. And I just kind of picked up the remote because on the table, and I just nudged the button a couple of times, and it kind of went down a couple of notches. I can't see how was it, it appears on the screen when the volume goes down, right? So I was like, oh yeah, Junko would have seen this, right? So anyway, like about 10 seconds later, Junko, like, she kind of pops up, like, and she's like, am I losing my hearing because of COVID? And I just was like I just lost it. I just absolutely lost it, because I was like, didn't you see on the screen like the bar go down? And she's like, no, she had her eyes closed. I was like, and she seriously was like worried that she was losing her hearing as well. I was like, no. But I like, it was just like, I think it was just such a, I just laughed. We just all laughed because it was so silly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it does happen. People lose their hearing from this. So maybe that's actually, but that's very real. But it was just like the way that she did it. She kind of slowly raised her head up, and I could just see she's like, "Am I losing my hearing as well? Is the TV just got quieter?"
Brilliant.
So it was, yeah. And of course,
because the silliest stuff, isn't it, that causes us to have,
and of course, because she said that she couldn't smell anything, I kind of said that, well, that's great. I can just, I can, rip ones to my heart's content now, and don't have to worry about it. which she found highly amusing, and certainly said, no, I don't think so. But anyway, that's
great.
Okay, last one here. Music. I love music. I'm asking guests to tell me a song or a couple of songs that they just really love, that get them through the good times or the bad times, or just want to have a good tune just going in the car or on your headphones, whatever. Can you tell us any?
I certainly can. Yeah. So I was trying to have a think about this before. The one that really, the first one I'll say that really reminds me of Lola is, have you heard of Rusted Root? If you've ever seen the Matilda film, it's I think it's at the beginning of the Matilda film, but it's Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root. Because I remember we filmed a couple of videos with Lola, like when I was playing around with her, and that's the song that we played at her memorial, and just like it's such a fun, like upbeat song that it just always reminds me of her. Like I have a little playlist that I listen to when I'm feeling crap, and I just want to be reminded of her. And then the other one is probably more for my wife, Riptide by Vance Joy. Like that is her favorite song, that she just lets her hair down and just forgets about everything, and she'll just let herself go. And Daisy loves it as well. Like the number of times I've seen them dancing in the lounge to that on full blast. It's such a feel good song that you can dance to. And yeah, so hopefully other people will relate to those, but they have a special feeling for us as a family.
Okay, so the second one there was Riptide, called Riptide, is that right?
Riptide by Vance Joy, yeah.
Vance Joy, okay. I've got it here. Fantastic.
But yeah, let me know what you think when you've had a listen.
I will. I'm gonna throw that on after we're finished here, so I can get into that. Okay, and the final one, which is what kind of 3 or 4 words describe your life at the moment as a dad?
3 or 4 words. I'd say blessed. I'd say love. I'd say roller coaster. Yeah, I'd say those are the 3. Whether there's a 4th as well. They kind of, yeah, I think they kind of summarize our daily lives. Maybe belonging as well. Like we feel like we have belonging with these other families that are going through very similar experiences with their children, and we feel belonging to that group.
Yeah.
We're not on our own. But yeah, I think, yeah, those are, I'm glad I came out with blessed and love first before the roller coaster. But I mean, life's a roller coaster for everyone, but more so, I mean, hourly it's a roller coaster for us, depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
It's
that's right. It is a roller coaster, and it is, like, I think acknowledging it and saying it, and because we need to do that. That is important that we do that. Because it is like that. I think so many of our lives are in roller coasters. I was saying last week in one of my episodes that one of my favorite songs is Highway to well, it is Highway to Hell, but it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And as I said the title, I was like, you know what, it's kind of quite fitting, because you're never at the top of things, right? You're just, so it's just,
it makes you appreciate the good things more when you've been through a whole lot of shit as well. Like,
it does.
You really, because you can take a lot for granted. And I think some of your other guests have talked about this, where we struggle to be around certain friends because they, through no fault of their own, like we would be probably exactly the same, but the trivial things like that really get on their backs, like, oh, that my child isn't sleeping properly, or her reading isn't great, and it's like, yeah, you're so lucky that that's the biggest thing that's keeping you awake at night. Like for us, it's like a whole new level. So that's why don't sweat the small stuff. And I think that maybe before I used to get really stressed about really stupid little things, but now I just kind of like, I just be like, okay, that's happened, but there's more important things to worry about. I'd rather shift my attention and focus on the big things rather than the small stuff, the trivial things.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel we're forming much closer relationships with other families that are going through a similar experience, whether they've got a child with special needs, or they've lost a child, or like we have a charity that's been incredible for us in terms of support. Meeting other families that understand like what it is like to go through this path, we find much more comfort in being with them. And it's like you surround yourself with people that make you feel better, not people that kind of drain energy. And kind of, that's what we've really learned through this. So you really know who your good friends are that are going to make you feel good. No matter what day you've had, they're going to come and say, look, I'm going to babysit tonight. You go and have a date night. And like, we've got an incredible friend last week. She said, you and Jess go and have a date night. I'll babysit. And we just went to do a pub quiz in the pub down the road. That was great. We just had a night out and it was great. We weren't sat there talking about the usual stuff. We're doing a pub quiz and we probably did terribly, but it meant that we were having fun and we were just trying to think of trivia and that sort of thing. Like, who are those friends that are going to do that for you and not be worried about like how things are. They genuinely want to understand what we're going through.
Yeah.
And that's something we've really kind of learned, because that helps us. Like, and it's all part of mental well-being.
You can't even put a price on that, right?
No, exactly.
It's just like, man, yeah, just gold. When I don't think, actually, it just sounds gold, because I don't think we've ever had that happen here, because we don't have, like, we have a babysitter who comes over that we have to tee up. She actually listens to my episodes. Hi, Emmy.
Let Steve and John could go out for their anniversary.
Yeah. Just anytime I feel like coming over and babysitting Emmy, just do it. No problem at all. Yeah,
anytime.
But it's so vital. And like, I mean, you I think you married like 20 years, or you've been together for 20 years.
Well, no, we met very young. We got married. It was we had our wedding anniversary. It's on Daisy's birthday, funnily enough. So wow. It's a day that definitely she gets the attention for. But yeah, it was 9 years this year. So, but we've been together longer than that. But yeah, I mean, it is really tough on a marriage, because when you're fully focused on your child and dealing with all that stress, you have no time to be in a marriage. And we often say that we are, first and foremost, we're carers. We are joint carers for Alfie. Sometimes you don't feel like husband and wife, because you don't have those opportunities to go out and just have fun together and do things that we used to do when we were younger. That's part of becoming a parent. So we're being much stricter on ourselves and making sure that at the end of every day we have that time when they're in bed to just chat, like what's on getting on top of us, like just talking things through. And we just find that just helps so much, just having that communication. But don't get me wrong, there are days where things have been so bad, we don't talk to each other, then things escalate, and then we have a blowout. And then once we get things off our chest, it's about just having that constant communication, and we're together in this journey. I couldn't think of going through this journey with anyone else. Like, Jess is a godsend, and she's the reason I'm still here today, because she's just amazing. But how do we have to be that partnership, and we have to pick each other up when we're down, and because otherwise we don't want to drag each other down, really. But
no,
and I'm sure the same relationship with you and Junko. Like, you have to, you have the rough with the smooth, but it's
bloody hard, man. I mean, it is. Yeah. Marriage is hard anyway, because you look at the divorce, you look at the divorce rate of what's going on, and then you pile on the added stresses that we have as a family, not just as a dad, but as a family. Trying to, get through that is like,
it's tough.
It's really tough. And I've heard his stories, and previous guest, Casey, like,
dealing with that on your own. Like, imagine,
and it's just, So I'm very, very thankful to have my lovely wife, who just, my goodness me, is like my biggest rock ever. And so thank you very much, Junko, for putting up with my shit every day. And and just, but I do try to be the best dad that I want to be, and I keep learning, and I'll always be learning. Yeah, absolutely. Adam, my man, it's been great. It's been fantastic, and thank you so much for your time. I think you're going to do the record of hopefully it's not the longest podcast. I'll get the longest. I think so. So congratulations, mate. You've taken it out in true style. You might need to break it down into a few shorter segments, otherwise I'll be sending a few people to sleep, I'm sure. But no, that's another way in which, I mean, I don't know about you, but just listening to podcasts really helps me just process things, and it's all part of not feeling like you're on your own. And I've been binging on yours since we first got introduced. So I wonder why my listener hits have been going up quite a lot recently. It's all down to you, mate. It's great stuff. I love it. Thank you so much. No, it's been thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been. Yeah, but let's keep talking. Exactly. Yeah. And that is always key. Is just, I think, I've got I talked a lot up almost like a good dozen dads now, or about there, and I always think to myself, I just got to drop these guys a message now and just be like, how you doing? How are you? Yeah. Like, and and I was thinking it the other day, I was thinking, like, because that's what it is. That's what it needs. Because I don't know whether they're getting it on their side, and it's just like, how you doing? How you, and touching base, and that is so important.
It
It's
is,
so important, because it just means there's that doorway, man. Like,
yeah.
and that doorway is just, really, such a vital thing to have.
Yeah, totally.
All right, okay, man.
Thanks, Steve.
Cool. Have a great day, man.
Good to speak
Enjoy
to you.
your footy,
Yeah.
playing footy
Thanks.
tonight.
Yeah, I will do.
Yep.
And I look forward to catching up again.
Yes, indeed. All right, mate. Thanks again.
Cool. Thanks,
Take
Steve.
care.
Take care.
Thanks, mate.